Chi Minh once said, "You will kill 10 of our men, and we will kill one of yours, and it will be you who tire of it." This quote perfectly represents Uncle Ho, as he was called affectionately, his resilience and determination in fighting even the might of the U.S. Army in the struggle for Vietnamese independence from France, which would lead to a series of events that would change the 20th century tremendously. His life went through many phases, not all of them very well known, primarily his early life. What we do know, as stated in Jean Saint-Amé's Ho Chi Minh and his Vietnam, he was born in a small village in 1890 under the name of Nguyen Sinh Cung. He received a French education because of his stout nationalist father, who believed that learning a French education would be vital to fighting them in the future for Vietnamese independence. I got that from Spartacus.schoolnet. In his 20s, he lived primarily in the U.S., Harlem and Boston, where he worked as a cook. He then moved to the UK and finally settled in France in 1917. It was there that he began to work in politics and approached the idea of communism as a road to nationalism. Most of his time in France was spent petitioning for Vietnamese civil rights. He was at the Versailles peace talks of 1919, but was largely ignored. Frustrated, he began to approach the idea of communism and formed the French Communist Party in 1920. 3 years later, he would move to communist Russia in an attempt to learn more about his communistic principles. Things happened there, very interesting things. As narrated by the Time magazine article, Ho Chi Minh, he altogether vanished from 1923 to 1929 as a covert agent for Moscow. He was undercover as either a monk or a reporter. His life during that period was very vague, as he was reported dead several times and would always reappear. He finally came back into the mainstream media in 1929 when he founded the Indochina Communist Party. He would stay their leader for the remainder of his life. Unfortunately for him, the time was not right yet to finally start fighting for Vietnamese independence. That time would not arise until World War II, around 1940. His actions during World War II would prove to lead to the Vietnam War. First off, in 1940, he changed his name from Nguyen Sinh Cung to Ho Chi Minh, which means "he who enlightens" in Vietnamese. A year later, he wrote a letter to the Vietnamese people, as I found in Vietnam History and Documents. That letter would urge the Vietnamese people to start fighting for their own independence from France. He would then find the Vietnamese Independence League, otherwise known as the Viet Minh. In 1946, he wrote the Declaration of Independence of Vietnam, which, interestingly enough, heavily parallels the American Declaration of Independence. In 1950, he got backed by China and his fellow communistic leaders, but in a meeting with General Mao Zedong and Joseph Stalin. He fought against the French from 1946 to 1954 when they were forced to stop fighting. The French were after a costly defeat. Now, what happened after that was that Vietnam was split into two. There was the North and the South. The North was primarily communistic. The South was free, comparatively. Ho Chi Minh would become the president of the North, and a anti-communist leader, Ngo Dinh Diem, would lead the South. Unsatisfied with this, Ho Chi Minh would then, in 1955, start attempting to unify the two through fighting, which would start the Vietnam War. In 1960, he created the Viet Cong, which we don't know. Which was a front for the liberation of South Vietnam. The U.S. would interfere in 1965. Ho Chi Minh would authorize the Tet Offensive. A lot of that is well known. While negotiations with the U.S., he would pass away on September 2nd, 1969, at the age of 79, about 6 years before the end of the Vietnam War. Even though he was dead, his death and the influences that came after it would still prove to be highly influential. The Tet Offensive, which he authorized in 1968, would prove to be the turning point in the war against the might of the U.S. Army. His fierce determination to make war last as long as it could would carry on in his successors all the way through to the fall of Saigon in 1975. He has also influenced me personally. You see, during the 1970s, midway through the 1970s, about 1975, a communist party named the Khmer Rouge would come to power through Vietnamese backing. Now, the Khmer Rouge, they were not nice people. My family did escape for 1975. I don't know exactly when, but they got here to America through Thailand. That was very dramatic. As a result of the Khmer Rouge communistic reign, which lasted from about 75 to 1979, 2 million of my Cambodian people would die in medieval-style killing camps, otherwise known as the killing fields. Liberation would happen, of course, by occupation by Vietnam, who would realize, the government of Vietnam would realize that perhaps having the Khmer Rouge in power was not the greatest idea, so they invaded Cambodia and liberated it in 1979. Well, I'm here, I'm very thankful for that. I think it's dandy that I'm still alive, although it would be nice to be fairly rich in Cambodia, as my family was back then. To me and my family, Ho Chi Minh will be known as the person who started everything, which led to me being here. The Vietnam War, of course, was is one of the most controversial wars in American history. It's America's only loss, even though technically it wasn't a war. And his dedication to the cause of Vietnamese independence, it was astounding. He never gave up, and he is still known in Vietnam as a hero. In fact, they still have their capital city, Ho Chi Minh City, named after him, which may or may not be changed soon. He was a very influential person to the world and